Anyone who has spent time in the northeastern region of the United States has come into contact with this massive, dominant tree species. So abundant and essential to the ecosystems of New England, it likely blends into the background for most. Lining highways and the edges of backyards, adorning parks and horticultural plantings, coming up just about anywhere in acidic soil, where it won't be removed, and most importantly of all, towering over the forests of the Northeast, we have a true symbol of New England, Pinus strobus, the eastern white pine. Easily hitting 100 feet tall, this imposing beast, if left undisturbed in ideal conditions, will reach 150 feet in its lifespan, with exceptional specimens reaching 175 feet. An extremely abundant species in many parts of its range, Pinus strobus is found throughout the entirety of all New England states, New York, and Pennsylvania. It is also found in the Canadian Maritimes, ranging as far north as Newfoundland. To the west, it is found in Ontario and around the Great Lakes. To the south, it can be found at increasingly high elevations in the Appalachian Mountains, with a few disjunct populations also found around the Midwest. Despite being the most abundant species of pine found in much of the regions it occurs, Pinus strobus is actually rather distantly related to other pines of our region, such as red pine, Pinus resinosa, or pitch pine, Pinus rigida, seen here alongside white pine. Pinus strobus shares more in common genetically with the pine species of Mexico and the American West, such as Mexico's Pinus chiapensis, or the famous sugar pines, Pinus lambertiana, of Yellowstone National Park. This is because the genus Pinus is actually split in two, with the subgenus Pinus representing yellow or hard pines, and the subgenus Strobus representing soft or white pines. Not only is Pinus strobus the only soft pine found here in New England, it is the only soft pine found on the entirety of the eastern half of the North American continent, with its sister species, Pinus chiapensis, occurring 2,000 miles to the southwest in the mountains of southern Mexico and Central America. Pinus strobus tolerates a wide variety of habitats, but like all other pines, does well where the soil is poor. The rocky, generally nutrient-deficient soil of New England practically invites it to thrive. While it can't tolerate quite as wide a range of conditions as the co-occurring Pinus rigida, Pinus strobus is able to remain competitive, even in a closed canopy setting, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. While found at higher altitudes in southern and western parts of its range, it is not particularly abundant in the mountains of New England, occurring from sea level only to about 1,500 feet, though there are exceptions to this. Pinus strobus is a keystone species of the region, towering in the forest canopy. One might note that underneath it, relatively little seems to grow. A closer look reveals a wealth of plants in the family Ericaceae, also tolerant of the poor soil and taking advantage of the abundance of fungal life symbiotic with Pinus strobus. Two species of Vaccinium, highbrush and lowbrush blueberries, are present here, as are two species of Chimaphila, Chimaphila maculata, the striped wintergreen, and Chimaphila umbellata, known by its native name, Pipsissewa. Also found here, but currently dormant, is a close relative of Chimaphila, Monotropa uniflora, a fungal parasite feasting on the rich fungal growth found around white pines. Though incredibly rare in other parts of the United States, Monotropa uniflora is locally abundant here in the eastern half of New England, especially where white pine grows undisturbed and in abundance. Looking around at the canopy, one can't help but feel white pine has a bit of a monopoly on things. An occasional white or red oak may break up the party, but many oak and pine woodlands are relatively clear in the mid-story. Vaccinium corymbosum, the occasional oak sapling, and on slightly richer sites, species of viburnum may be found, but one should note the most predominant mid-story plant here is simply young white pines. Unlike the other three species found in the region, white pine can be remarkably tolerant of shade. This gives it a competitive advantage over many other tree species. It can live happily in the understory, waiting patiently. Eventually, when the opportunity arises, it can rapidly spring up to fill a gap in the overstory. Here we can see it is beginning to shade out presumably older pitch pines, one of which has already passed on. This species is one of incredible economic importance. White pine lumber is light, strong, and easy to work with. The abundance and fast growth of the species also keeps it relatively cheap, as it is very receptive to being grown on plantations. So industrious is the wood of this tree, it was claimed by the British Crown prior to the American Revolution. Its strong, straight trunks, unrivaled by any other species in the Northeast, were sought after for use as masts for ships of the British Navy. So much so were the rights to harvest this tree fought over, it led to a minor pre-revolutionary skirmish in New Hampshire, known as the Pine Tree Rebellion. The white pine was also prominently featured on early colonial flags, known as pine tree flags, and is still featured today on the state flag of Maine. Much like the Gadsden flag, co-opted by the American alt-right Tea Party movement, the pine tree flag has also occasionally been stolen by right-wing propagandists, who don't seem to understand either the historical significance of the flag, nor the ecological significance of the tree depicted upon it. Pinus strobus is a conifer, and as such does not produce flowers. It does, however, produce cones. Much larger and longer than those of native hard pines, we can see two Pinus strobus cones here next to a Pinus rigida cone. Note that the Pinus rigida cone tends to be rounder and more compact, and the white pine cone is overall larger and elongated. Being early in the spring, we can see what emergent new growth looks like at the end of the branches on this young pine. As a soft pine, Pinus strobus produces 5 needles per fascicle. Fascicle just being a fancy word to describe a bundle of needles. This contrasts with all other native and introduced pine species found in our region, which produce only 2 or 3 needles per fascicle. Though the bark of young white pines is smooth, the lofty, mature white pines produce thick, deeply fissured bark, which does not resemble the thinner, plated, and sheathing bark of its cousin, Pinus rigida. I hope you learned something from this video and share with others on a walk through your local woods. I appreciate the reception to this new format I got in the skunk cabbage video, and I thank you for your feedback. I encourage you to check that video out if you have not already, and I hope you have a pleasant day. Thank you.